The city was unusually quiet that night, as if even the streets were tired of carrying secrets. Heavy rain poured from the dark sky, soaking the roads, the buildings, and the forgotten corners where people liked to hide their pain. Streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt, creating long yellow shadows that stretched like memories no one wanted to face. It was the kind of night where lives could change, but most people never noticed. Inside a black luxury SUV, Adrian Moretti sat silently, his face hard and unreadable. At 46 years old, he had everything most men dreamed of: money, power, fear, respect, but none of it brought warmth to his heart. He was known as a ruthless mafia boss, a man whose name alone could close doors and end conversations. People obeyed him not because they loved him, but because they were terrified of crossing him. Adrian preferred it that way. Feelings made men weak, and weakness had no place in his world. The car moved slowly through the city, guarded by darkness and rain. Adrian had just finished another business meeting, another deal involving money, territory, and control. His life ran on routine, and he rarely noticed anything outside it. He did not believe in fate, luck, or second chances. To him, life was simple: you made choices, and you lived with them. No excuses. As the car approached an old bridge on the edge of the city, Adrian looked out the window without interest. That was when he saw something unusual. Near the railing of the bridge, under the harsh rain, a woman was sitting on the ground. She looked small and fragile, her body curled as if she was trying to protect herself from the world. Her clothes were thin and soaked, her hair stuck to her face, and one hand was tightly holding her stomach. Adrian narrowed his eyes. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. The driver slowed down instinctively, but Adrian said nothing. Normally, he would have ignored it. People suffered every day, and he could not save them all. That was what he told himself. But something about the woman felt different. Maybe it was the way she struggled to breathe, or the way she tried to stand and failed. Maybe it was the fear written clearly on her face. "Stop the car," Adrian said suddenly. The driver hesitated, surprised. "Boss, this area isn't safe. We should keep moving." Adrian did not repeat himself. His voice was calm but firm. The car stopped. Rain hit Adrian's suit as he stepped out, but he didn't care. He walked toward the woman, his expensive shoes splashing in the dirty water. She looked up when she heard footsteps, and fear immediately filled her eyes. In her mind, he was just another powerful man who could hurt her. She tried to crawl back, but pain stopped her. "Please," she whispered weakly. "I don't want trouble." Adrian stood there for a moment, studying her. She looked young, no more than 24 or 25. Her face was pale, her lips trembling, and her hands were shaking badly. She was exhausted, hungry, and clearly in pain. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked, his voice low. I think the baby is coming," she said, tears mixing with rain. "I have nowhere to go." Adrian felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. He ignored it. He bent down and carefully lifted her, surprised by how light she felt in his arms. She gasped softly but didn't resist. She was too tired to fight. "Take her to the hospital," Adrian told the driver. Inside the car, the woman kept apologizing, saying she didn't have money, saying she didn't want problems. Adrian said nothing. He just stared ahead, his jaw tight, as if he was trying to understand why he had stopped at all. At the hospital, Adrian paid for everything without asking questions. Private room. Emergency care. Best doctors available. He told the staff nothing about who he was. To them, he was just a well-dressed man who refused to leave. The woman's name was Lily Carter. She told the nurse in a weak voice, while holding her stomach. She had been homeless for weeks after losing her job. The baby's father had disappeared the moment he learned about the pregnancy. That night, stress and hunger pushed her body to its limit. Adrian stood outside the room as doctors rushed in. He listened to the sounds of pain, fear, and urgency behind the door. For reasons he could not explain, he stayed. He could have left at any moment, but his feet would not move. Hours passed. When the doctor finally came out and said both mother and baby were stable, Adrian felt something heavy lift from his chest. He didn't realize he had been holding his breath. Late that night, Adrian looked through the glass window at Lily sleeping peacefully, her hand resting protectively on her belly. She looked calmer now, almost safe. The rain outside had softened, tapping gently against the windows. Adrian turned away, telling himself it meant nothing. Just a stranger. Just one night. He had no idea that this night, which was never meant to matter, had already begun to destroy the walls he had built around his heart for decades. And fate, patient and cruel, was only getting started. Morning arrived slowly, as if the city itself was unsure whether it should wake up after the long night. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a cold silence that felt heavier than the storm. Adrian Moretti sat in his car outside the hospital, his hands resting on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. He should have been gone hours ago. Men like him did not wait in hospital parking lots. They handled business, gave orders, and moved on. Yet he was still there, unable to drive away, feeling a strange weight pressing on his chest that no amount of money or power could remove. Inside the hospital room, Lily Carter woke up to the sound of machines softly beeping. Her body ached, but the sharp pain from the night before had faded. She slowly placed her hand on her stomach, relief washing over her face. When she felt movement. The baby was alive. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear this time, but from gratitude. She had expected to be alone, ignored like she always was. Instead, she had been saved by a stranger she did not understand. When the nurse entered, Lily asked quietly about the man who brought her in. The nurse smiled and said he was still around, asking if everything she needed was being taken care of. Lily felt confused. No one had ever stayed for her before. People usually helped only when they wanted something in return, but this man had asked for nothing. Adrian finally entered the room later that morning. He stood near the door, keeping his distance, as if he was afraid of crossing an invisible line. Lily looked at him carefully now that the fear had settled. He looked tired, older than she first thought, with deep lines around his eyes that suggested a life filled with hard choices. Despite his calm appearance, something about him felt heavy, like a storm quietly waiting beneath still water. "Thank you," Lily said softly. "I don't know why you helped me, but, thank you." Adrian nodded once. "You and the baby needed help. That's all." Lily wanted to ask more, but something in his tone told her not to push. She simply nodded, resting back against the pillow. Adrian stayed only a few minutes before leaving, but even after he walked out, his presence lingered in the room like a shadow. Over the next few days, Adrian kept returning. Always quietly. Always alone. He never stayed long, but he made sure Lily had food, clean clothes, and proper medical care. The doctors treated her with respect, and the bills were paid without question. Lily noticed the way nurses whispered about the man, the way people straightened when he walked past. She began to realize he was not just a kind stranger. One afternoon, while Adrian waited in the hallway, he overheard a nurse talking to another staff member about Lily. The nurse spoke without knowing. Adrian was listening. She mentioned Lily's background casually, the way people often talk about sad stories when they think they don't matter. "She's had a hard life," the nurse said. "Mother died young. Father unknown. Abandoned as a baby and raised in foster homes. No family at all." The words hit Adrian like a blow to the chest. Abandoned as a baby. Father unknown. For a moment, the hallway seemed to spin. Adrian leaned against the wall, his heart beating faster than it had in years. Memories he had buried deep inside began pushing their way to the surface, memories of a woman named Grace Carter, a woman he once loved before fear and ambition ruined everything. He remembered her tears, her anger, and the final words she screamed when he walked away from her life forever. "You'll regret this one day," she had said. Adrian had never looked back. That night, Adrian ordered a private investigation, using resources he usually reserved for enemies. He told himself it was just curiosity, that he was imagining things. Still, his hands trembled slightly as he waited for the report. When the file finally arrived, thin and simple, he stared at it for a long time before opening it. Lily Carter. Date of birth. Place of birth. Mother, Grace Carter. Father, not listed. Adrian felt the air leave his lungs. Grace's daughter. His daughter. The realization crushed him with a force no bullet ever could. The woman he had saved was not just a stranger. She was the child he had abandoned without ever knowing her face. All the years he spent building an empire suddenly felt empty, meaningless. Power could not protect him from this truth. Adrian sat alone in his office that night, staring at the city lights outside his window. For the first time in decades, he allowed himself to feel regret fully and deeply. Lily had grown up without him, suffered without him, and now faced motherhood alone, just as Grace once had. And fate, cruel and patient, had brought them together only after it was almost too late. The next time Adrian visited the hospital, he looked at Lily differently. Every small movement, every expression on her face, felt painfully familiar. He saw grace in her eyes, in the way she tried to stay strong even when she was afraid. Lily noticed his silence, his heavy gaze, but she did not know the reason behind it. Adrian wanted to tell her the truth. He wanted to confess everything and beg for forgiveness he knew he did not deserve. But fear stopped him. Fear of rejection. Fear of destroying what little peace Lily had found. So he stayed silent, carrying the truth alone, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. Outside the hospital window, the city continued its usual noise, unaware that a man who ruled through fear had just been defeated by blood, memory, and a past that refused to stay buried. The truth changed Adrian Moretti in ways no enemy ever had. After discovering that Lily was his daughter, the world he controlled so carefully began to feel unfamiliar, almost unstable. He moved through his days like a man carrying a heavy secret, one that pressed against his chest with every breath he took. Meetings continued, orders were given, and money flowed as it always had, but inside him something was breaking slowly and silently. The fear he had built his life on no longer protected him, because fear meant nothing when the battle was against his own past. Adrian returned to the hospital often, but now every visit felt different. When he looked at Lily, he no longer saw a stranger who needed help, he saw the child he had never held, the life he had chosen to abandon. Every small detail about her affected him deeply, from the way she apologized too much to the way she tried to stay strong even when exhaustion showed on her face. He noticed how she always kept one hand on her stomach, protecting her unborn child as if the world itself was a threat. That simple gesture filled him with both pride and shame, because he knew he had never protected her that way. Lily, on the other hand, felt a growing confusion she could not explain. Adrian's presence was comforting but also unsettling. She sensed sadness in him, something heavier than kindness. Sometimes she caught him staring at her with an expression that felt too personal, almost painful. She wondered if he reminded her of someone, or if he was carrying a story he could not speak aloud. Despite her questions, she felt safe around him, and that feeling scared her because she had learned long ago not to trust easily. As Lily's condition stabilized, doctors prepared for the baby's arrival. The due date was close, and stress still lingered in her body. Adrian ensured she remained under the best care, even arranging for a secure place for her to stay after the birth. He told himself he was doing it out of responsibility, but deep inside, he knew it was guilt guiding his actions. He wanted to fix something that could never fully be repaired. One quiet evening, Adrian visited the cemetery where Grace Carter was buried. The air was cold, and the sky hung low with gray clouds. He stood in front of the simple gravestone, reading her name again and again as if seeing it for the first time. Memories rushed back to him, memories of love mixed with fear, of promises broken by ambition. He spoke aloud, his voice low and rough, telling her he had found Lily, telling her he had failed them both. For the first time in his life, Adrian Moretti cried openly, not caring who might see. The tears did not bring relief, but they reminded him that he was still human. The night Lily went into labor arrived without warning. Pain woke her suddenly, sharp and overwhelming. Nurses rushed into the room as her breathing became uneven, and fear filled her eyes. She had imagined this moment many times, but now that it was happening, she felt completely unprepared. She asked for Adrian without knowing why, calling his name in panic as contractions grew stronger. When he was informed, Adrian dropped everything and rushed to the hospital, his heart racing faster than it ever had during any violent confrontation. Adrian arrived just as Lily was being taken to the delivery room. He stayed near her, close enough to be seen but far enough not to overwhelm her. Lily clung to his hand during the worst moments, squeezing tightly as pain tore through her body. Adrian said nothing, but his grip never loosened. In that moment, he felt the weight of every year he had missed, every chance he had lost to protect her. He wanted to tell her everything, but the words stayed trapped in his throat. Hours passed like endless waves of fear and effort until finally, the cry of a newborn filled the room. A baby girl was born, small but strong, her voice loud and clear. Lily sobbed with relief as the nurse placed the baby on her chest. She named her Ava, whispering the name softly as if afraid the moment would disappear. Adrian stood nearby, frozen, his eyes filled with tears he did not try to hide. He watched his granddaughter take her first breath, feeling a mix of joy and pain so powerful it left him shaking. After the birth, Adrian stepped out of the room, unable to stay. He leaned against the wall in the hallway, pressing his hand to his face as emotions overwhelmed him. He had ordered deaths without blinking, yet this single moment had undone him completely. He realized then that blood was not just a connection, it was a responsibility, a burden that demanded courage and truth. Avoiding it any longer would destroy him. When Adrian returned to Lily's room later that night, he looked at her with determination. He knew he could not keep the truth hidden forever. Lily deserved honesty, even if it meant losing her forever. He sat beside her bed, his voice heavy and quiet, and told her there was something important he needed to say. Lily sensed the seriousness in his tone and listened closely. 7. Holding Ava gently in her arms. The moment of truth was coming, and Adrian knew that once spoken, nothing would ever be the same again. The power he once ruled with meant nothing now. All that mattered was whether a daughter he had failed could ever forgive the man who had abandoned her, and whether love could survive the weight of such a painful past. The room felt unusually quiet as Adrian sat beside Lily's bed, the soft sound of Ava's breathing filling the space between them. Lily looked tired but peaceful, her arms wrapped protectively around her newborn daughter. She noticed the tension in Adrian's posture, the way his hands rested stiffly on his knees, and how his eyes avoided hers. She sensed that whatever he was about to say carried a weight that could not be taken back. The kindness she had felt from him since the night under the bridge suddenly felt connected to something deeper, something she was only beginning to understand. Adrian took a slow breath, struggling to find words that could carry the truth without causing harm. He began by speaking about mistakes, about choices made out of fear and ambition, and about a woman named Grace Carter. When Lily heard her mother's name, her body stiffened. No one ever spoke of her mother without pain. Adrian's voice shook as he explained how he had known Grace long ago, how he had walked away when responsibility frightened him more than loss. As the truth unfolded, Lily's heart pounded harder with every word, a growing sense of disbelief spreading through her. When Adrian finally said the words that mattered most, that he was her father, the world seemed to stop moving. Lily stared at him in silence, her face drained of color. She searched his eyes, hoping to find a lie, a misunderstanding, anything that would make the truth less real. Memories of loneliness, foster homes, and unanswered questions flooded her mind all at once. She felt anger, confusion, and deep sadness mixing together, forming a pain that was difficult to breathe through. Lily did not scream or cry. She simply turned away, holding Ava closer to her chest as if shielding her from the truth. She asked Adrian to leave, her voice calm but firm. Adrian obeyed without protest, knowing he had no right to ask for forgiveness or understanding. As he walked out of the room, the sound of the door closing felt final, like the closing of a chapter he had avoided for too long. Days passed without any word from Lily. Adrian respected her silence, though it felt unbearable. He used the time to make changes he had delayed for years. He began cutting ties with dangerous business connections, shifting his resources toward legitimate work. He ensured Lily and Ava were protected financially without forcing his presence into their lives. These actions were not attempts to buy forgiveness, but quiet efforts to become someone worthy of it, even if forgiveness never came. Lily struggled deeply during those days. Alone in a small apartment provided by the hospital, she spent long hours staring at Ava, wondering how history repeated itself so cruelly. She thought about her mother, Grace, and the strength it must have taken to raise a child alone. She realized that Adrian had saved her without knowing who she was, and that fact mattered more than his past failures. Slowly, her anger softened into understanding, though the pain never fully disappeared. One afternoon, Lily asked Adrian to meet her in a quiet park. When he arrived, he stood at a distance, unsure of his place. Lily spoke first, telling him she was not ready to call him father and that the wounds of abandonment could not heal overnight. However, she acknowledged that he had shown care when it mattered most and that he had taken responsibility instead of running again. She allowed him to be present in Ava's life, not as a replacement for the past, but as someone willing to build something new. Adrian accepted her boundaries without hesitation. He promised honesty, patience, and consistency, things he had never been good at before. Over time, his presence became gentle and steady rather than overwhelming. He learned how to hold Ava, how to listen more than he spoke, and how to show love without control. Lily observed these changes carefully, allowing trust to grow slowly, naturally, without pressure. Years later, Adrian would sit quietly in the same park, watching Ava play while Lily laughed nearby. The power he once chased meant nothing compared to moments like this. He had not erased his past, but he had faced it, and in doing so, he had changed his future. Lily never forgot the pain of being abandoned, but she learned that healing did not require forgetting, only choosing a different path. The night that was never meant to matter had given all of them a second chance. Adrian Moretti, once feared by many, found redemption not through power, but through responsibility and love. Lily found strength in truth, and Ava grew surrounded by honesty rather than secrets. Their story was not perfect, but it was real, and sometimes, that was enough to change everything.